All right, well, hello everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. We are going to go over our new grant program, Advanced Colorado Broadband.
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
I still see a lot of people in the waiting room.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, there's only 5 people. I think let them in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can totally wait. So you haven't let everyone in the waiting room yet?
Oh, I thought you were. Okay. I'm doing that now.
Am I doing that?
I just admitted everyone. It'll take a few seconds for them to be let in. Okay.
We're coming off a 3-day weekend.
Yeah. Now we should be good to go. Looks like everyone's admitted. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are happy that you're able to join us this morning. The Colorado Broadband Office staff is on the call. And we are going to talk about the Advanced Colorado Broadband Grant Program that we recently launched, and specifically the letter of intent to apply for grant funding window that is currently open. So just a few quick logistics. The webinar is being recorded. Where we will post the recording to our website later for those who are not able to attend, or if you want to watch again. Everyone is muted. And we do ask that you hold your questions until the end. We have a lot of information to share, and we might be able to answer some of that information as we go. But we will do Q&A afterwards. You can raise your hand, or you can feel free to chat your question as well. Go ahead to the next slide, Megan. So why are we here? We're here because the Colorado Broadband Office is working to bring Coloradans access to high-speed internet. We believe nearly every aspect of our lives involves technology, so we want to make sure everyone has access to reliable broadband. We believe that anyone without it could be at a serious disadvantage. So we are working hard to bridge the gap. Colorado is going to receive federal funding from various federal programs over the next couple of years. And we're going to use our new grant program, Advanced Colorado Broadband, to deploy those funds. We're going to elaborate a little bit more on that here in just a minute. If you are planning to apply for federal funding, we're inviting you to fill out a letter of intent. And the window to submit the letter of intent is open now. It closes July 18th. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about timelines and information here in the webinar in just a moment. The letter of intent is going to allow us to work with stakeholders in broadband across Colorado to develop proposals that have the highest impact on our state and for Coloradans, as well as determining the best federal funding for each project. So we're going to walk through that process in this webinar. I'm now going to hand it off to Brandy Ryder. She's the Executive Director of the Colorado Broadband Office, and she's going to go over the Advanced Colorado Broadband Program and the letter of intent. So Brandy.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. So happy Tuesday, everybody. We are very happy to finally launch our Advanced Colorado Broadband Program. This will be the umbrella program for all of our grant funding over the next couple of years. We developed this brand because we needed to streamline the process to deploy this money, and our program will allow us to review all potential broadband projects and determine if they should be funded, guide applicants to work together and ensure projects meet federal funding program requirements so that they can receive funding, and then choose which federal program we can use to fund them. So I see the CBO kind of being the fund maker, grant maker, fund matchmaker, if you will, for projects. And then it'll tell us about the projects that you have, again, to make a positive impact on Coloradans in your area. Next slide. So program overview, our goal is to fund broadband projects that bring access to high-speed internet across the state for all Coloradans. Our current broadband situation, I know if you're on the call, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we do have a pretty significant digital divide in Colorado, and fortunately, we have historic funding to help bridge the digital divide and bring access and equity and affordability in the broadband space to Coloradans. In order to make the biggest impact with this federal funding and help as many Coloradans as possible, we need a few things from you guys on the phone, stakeholders and partners and communities. We want communities working together to determine areas in need of broadband access. And this is specifically, obviously, for the capital projects funds, but all of the funds that we will deploy over the next couple of years. So this means municipalities, local governments, tribes, utility providers working with industry, community anchors, and even nonprofits to develop plans together that address areas of critical need. To help, we also need help in areas of Colorado that are currently unserved, which means there's no internet, or underserved communities with poor internet first. So those are the areas, those are the definitions of areas of critical needs for funding. And then building and improving the state's middle mile network, which is the backbone of our broadband infrastructure and will ensure reliable, fast internet for future generations. So our programs, our middle mile programs, they're not last mile, although middle mile has to connect to last mile for our programs because we need to connect households. And as I said, Colorado will receive millions of dollars for broadband expansion and improvements from the federal government programs over the next few years. And we're going to be leveraging 4 main programs as a state, just so you guys are aware. Capital Projects Fund, which is what we're working on right now. And that's around, so we have about $162 million available in funding for that. We have Enabling Middle Mile Infrastructure Program, and there's going to be around $5 million to $100 million for this program as well. We have the Digital Equity Act, which is just short of $1 million, $900,000. We're partnering with Office of Future of Work to implement that program. And then we have Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, which is BEAD. And the state can receive anywhere. We'll receive at a minimum $100 million, but it could be upwards of $700 million, depending on the data that's in our mapping. And we are working on our maps, just so you guys know. But those are the 4 main programs. I'm going to be talking about Capital Projects Fund today, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the Middle Mile program. We are going to do something completely separate for BEAD as we gain more information. That program's a little bit further out, but we have it on our radar to address, but it'll include a separate engagement with all of you on the call. Next slide. So important to know, we're gonna require a match on capital projects. It's gonna be around 25%. But if you cannot afford a grant match, because I realize there's communities out there that just don't have the money, or partners that don't have the money, we'll grant waivers for folks if you can demonstrate an economic hardship. We'll also include in-kind match as well. Again, we want to make sure that we're not putting in barriers, we're not implementing barriers for funding, but we also recognize that our partners should have some skin in the game as we move forward with this historic funding. The LOI is not required, nor is it a guarantee of funding. I just want to put that out there. We are simply collecting proposals from our communities and stakeholders and partners at this point to consider so that we can consider projects for funding and then submit our planning to the Treasury Department at the end of the summer. The Broadband Deployment Board, because I want to touch a little bit on this because I know we might get a question, will continue to fund broadband projects using state-funded programs and any sort of allocations that come from the legislation. So for example, they were allocated $35 million in the last legislative session in ARPA dollars. So they'll continue doing what they're doing. And so I encourage you, if you are looking for funding, you can always look at their website and apply. That I think we've opened up our next cycle. So anyway, that's still a resource for communities out there, ISPs. So again, Lauren mentioned it's the timeline for LOIs. We opened it last week, which was June 15th. I believe it was Wednesday. We'll be accepting LOIs through July 18th. And the expected time to open the grant program will be early 2023. So there'll be an official application process that will require a little bit more information. The LOI, we tried to keep it simple so that you guys can put your proposals together without spending a ton of time and money. But anyway, that's kind of the process for right now. Next slide. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the letter of intent to complete your project information in more detail, and so that you'll have a pretty good sense of what we're looking for. Next slide. All right. So the letter of intent questions are shaped for projects that may apply to the Capital Projects Fund or middle mile requirements because these are the first available funding programs. So starting with the program overview, and I'm going through each section of the LOI. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at it. But this section is required and asks for important information regarding your project. So program overview questions. Which program are you interested in? Right now, there's two options right now. There's Capital Projects Fund and Middle Mile. So if you're interested in both, select both. If you're interested in one and not the other, or vice versa, indicate. But if you have any sort of middle mile funding that you're interested in, please let me know. The reason why this is important is because the state has to submit a middle mile plan to the NTIA, and there might be items or components of your project that the state could include in its plan and submit that to NTIA. And so you can, depending on what your status is, you can apply directly to the NTIA for middle mile if you want. But it might make more sense in some scenarios that the state works with the community or a partner or stakeholder to include their middle mile piece in our plan, just to make sure that our dollars are going, that we can expand our dollars if possible, and create more space in the capital projects funds for more funding. And again, the federal programs, they're different requirements for different programs. So we're trying to leverage them in a way that gets us the biggest bang for our buck as Colorado. So if you're interested in middle mile, and there's middle mile piece, there's a middle mile, you're interested in middle mile funding, and there's a piece of your project that speaks to that, please check the box. And we'll follow up with you later on your LOI, so we make sure that we have a good understanding of your project. So the next one is, why is this project important to your community at this time? So we're asking you to describe the areas of critical need related to access, affordability, reliability, and consistency that has resulted from or was made apparent by the COVID-19 public health emergency. So these dollars are in response to the global pandemic. So you'll want to demonstrate that why this is important, but also highlight the fact that the pandemic broadband access was made really clear, and was that there were issues because of the pandemic and having to log on and be able to do your regular business and function as a community. So it's pretty broad, which I like, because I think everything in our lives was affected by the pandemic, especially our access to the internet. So, but again, if you have any questions, certainly reach out. The next one is describe how the project is designed to enable work, education, and health monitoring, or access to critical services.
At the moment right now, we have people either.
So this question, for capital projects specifically, you have to demonstrate how your project meets all of these. So it's not an and or, it's an and. So you have to demonstrate in your application how your project enables work, education, and health monitoring to access critical services. So your project has to demonstrate all three. What quantitative or qualitative data support that you're going to provide with your proposal? So examples of this can be expanding broadband, or looking at existing broadband performance like speed tests, federal or state collected broadband data, user speed test results, interviews with community members or business owners, reports from community organizations, or any other information that you deem relevant. I know some of you guys have either local or regional broadband plans. You can use some of that data. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel if you've already done it, but you have to demonstrate that some sort of data that supports your proposal. Next slide. So how will you engage your community to shape the project plan, implementation, and operation? So this is a question. So examples, all of our programs require significant community engagement. So you can demonstrate, community meetings you've had, surveys or speed tests, community input is very important, and something that we're going to be looking for. If you haven't done it, you can capitalize on some of the community outreach that you've done around broadband up until now. So if you haven't done it between now and when you submit your LOI, you can do that in between. So you might poll your community, you might poll stakeholders, or you might do a town hall or something to that effect. So, just, something that demonstrates that you've reached out to the community to help shape your broadband plan. Number of households, businesses, and communities your project will serve. So this data point isn't really required for CPF, but I know that it's important to Governor Polis, and so we want to at least try to project how many households will be connected or customers that will be connected because of your project. And again, this is an estimate. I think some of you might know the exact number, but because this is a proposal, you can certainly provide any data on this. Just try to be as accurate in your projection as possible, if that's even a thing. So the next question is, are you participating in the Federal Affordability Connectivity Program, which is ACP? Basically, this means you have to provide a low-cost option in addition to the ACP participation. So this is a requirement per the Treasury. And so any federal broadband program requires you to participate in the ACP. We have a website up here if you want more information. I could spend a whole webinar talking about that, but we just want to touch on it. But basically the summary is Treasury has identified the Federal Communications Commission's ACP as the Federal Consumer Broadband Subsidy Program that a service provider must participate in for a completed broadband infrastructure project. State recipients must require the service provider to participate in the ACP for the lifespan of the broadband infrastructure project, or until the ACP or its successor programs are no longer operating. So that's just that's a summary. But if you want more detail, I encourage you to go to the FCC website. The next question is project start and end date. Pretty basic. I know that some of these projects are pretty complicated, so I know as soon as you set a date, it moves. But just try to project when you might start your project and when it could be completed. In an ideal scenario, I know we have supply chain issues and staffing issues and labor issues out there, so we want to try to capture what you're thinking, how long it's going to take your project from start to finish. Next slide. So project budget. This section is about your project budget. We know you all can provide. We know you guys can provide estimates at this time. Some of you might know a little bit more detail what your project will cost, but some of it's more of a projection. But this is required for our submission to Treasury. But we want to capture what your estimates are for pre-design, engineering, permitting, and labor, and then supplies and equipment. So this is construction, it's fiber, it's devices, it's anything physical. If unsure, just add it, and we'll sharpen our pencils a little bit later after you submit. But you'll want to provide a total as well for the project. And I know in the Capital Projects Fund application to Treasury, you can provide numbers or percentages. So either or, definitely prefer numbers. We can always do the math to get to percentages, but that's what we're looking at for the project budget. Next slide. So there's 3 programs that you can request money to fund. And the 3 programs for capital projects are infrastructure, digital connectivity, and multi-purpose facilities. I'll highlight each one of them, and I'll start with infrastructure. So basically, it's fiber towers, fixed wireless, carrier neutral locations, anything that's physical that's required to construct. Next slide. Or sorry, yeah. So next slide. So in this section, we need to understand how is this proposal designed so it does not duplicate existing investments from enforceable federal or state funding commitments for reliable wireline service. So you'll want to demonstrate that. One of the things I should tell you is the Capital Projects Fund, there is a preference for wireline, so fiber. So those are projects that we're trying to fund. I recognize that it's going to be really hard to construct fiber, install fiber in many areas of our state. but there is a preference for wireline. I know there's fixed wireless is totally an option, but for capital projects, we're going to be looking for wireline projects for middle mile. And then, and I know we're not talking about BEAD today, but with BEAD, there's a lot more flexibility there for fixed wireless. But for the purposes of the capital projects fund and middle mile, we're looking at fiber. So with this question, we, CDO can provide resources to help you gather this information. So understanding where you might be overbuilding or, where there's other investments that currently exist in your environment. So CBO, our website has a data mapping hub. Like I said, we're working on our maps like every other state, but CBO is going to work on an additional mapping resource to support your proposal, which includes CPF speeds. And we'll email our listserv when it's ready. So we're looking probably a week or two out on that, but make sure you signed up for our listserv so you get those emails. But we're going to put together a map to help support your effort in trying to figure out where these existing investments already exist. The other resource too is NTIA has resources. Indicators of broadband need maps are on their website, and we've also included a link in this presentation as well for you guys if you want to take a look at that. Then the next question, upon project completion, how will you ensure service that reliably meets or exceeds symmetrical download and upload speeds of 100 megabytes per second? So this is a requirement for capital projects. So for example, if because of geography, topography, or excessive cost, you cannot achieve 100 symmetrical, you need to tell us why. And tell us how you will ensure that it reliably meets the next threshold, which is 100 down and 20 up. So, the preference is for 100 symmetrical. If you can't get 100 symmetrical, the next one is 120. So you'll just need to, tell us how you're going to be able to do that consistently. So the next question is describe the technology to be used. We have a list of technology that is required, that was provided to us by the Treasury, so you don't have to kind of put in others. We have a list of technologies, and if it doesn't exist, you'll just have to let us know like what you're doing, but you'll have to check the box on those. And then next slide. So this is where we're going into digital connectivity. These are projects that are personal devices like laptops, tablets, personal desktops. Equipment includes access points, repeaters, and routers. So those are some of the examples of digital connectivity for this section. And just so you know, I'll go over it a little bit later, but if you don't have to apply for all the funds, like for each program. If you're just doing digital connectivity, fill out the digital connectivity section. If you're just doing infrastructure, do the same. Or if you're doing both, fill them out. So what I'm saying is it's not all or nothing. You can apply it. You can fill out the information that's relevant to the project you're submitting to us. So next slide. So going over this section, will the devices be used to connect to broadband internet? So obviously, devices you're requesting funding for have to connect to the internet. Has affordability been identified as a barrier to access the internet? So if you answer yes to this, we want you to explain a little bit more. Our LOI will ask for a summary of evidence that shows that there is a affordability barrier. So possible examples for that are broadband internet service performance and pricing. So that could be a barrier. Federal or state collected broadband data, user speed tests, these are sources, sorry. So in order to demonstrate a barrier, you can use certain sources. So to help demonstrate that, I just want to give a few examples, so hopefully it's not confusing. So you can use your internet service performance and pricing in your community as an example to barriers of affordability. We also have federal and state collected broadband data. Again, we have some resources for you there as well. User speed tests, for example, you might have a situation where someone's paying a little bit more for less service, so demonstrating that as well in your speed tests. And then there's a host of data, American Community Survey, the U.S. Department of Commerce, the NTIA, indicators of broadband need map, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Qualified Census Tract related to internet use, device ownership, and income and poverty. So there's a lot of data sources out there for you to demonstrate or explain how the project, there's an affordability issue with the internet for your digital connectivity project. The next question, will funds be used solely to purchase devices? So you'll want to say yes to that if this is relevant to your project. Describe how ownership of the assets will be maintained by you as a subrecipient and how you will make them available to the public. So this is really important because any devices that you purchase using these funds, you have to own and maintain them. And you have to do it for at least 5 years after the award. So, this is really important. So if you're, if you're a library, we're not, and you want, to purchase, laptops to serve your community or some devices to help connect your community, you want to demonstrate that those are going to stay in your ownership. So that's just one example of many. If you have other questions about what that means, you can certainly reach out. Next slide. So you'll complete the multi-purpose facilities section if this is relevant for your project. So if your project's related to multi-purpose facilities, you'll want to answer the following questions. We're talking about community centers, apartment complexes, libraries, rec centers, office buildings, nurses' home, education facilities. There's a laundry list of multiple multi-purpose facilities. So that's what we're talking about here. And multi-purpose facilities are defined as buildings that are designed to jointly and directly enable work, education, and health monitoring under CPF. So again, you have to demonstrate how your project will achieve all three of those in this section as well. Next slide. So projects to construct or improve buildings that are designed to jointly and directly enable work, education, and health monitoring are eligible for funding under the Capital Projects Fund program. So examples of multi-use projects, like I said, projects to construct or improve libraries that provide public access to the internet for purposes including work, education, and health monitoring, such as offering digital service or digital skills programs and support for community members engaging in virtual learning. So those are some of the examples. We'll consider projects to construct or improve community health centers that provide a broad range of services to communities they serve, including access to job counseling, employment services, health education classes, or internship programs for medical professionals. So that's another example. And then what type of features does a multi-purpose community facility provide? So you'll want to be able to answer that question. So this can be, again, like I said, personal devices like laptops, tablets, desktop personal computers, equipment, including access points, repeaters, and routers. So those are some of the examples. And then it says, like I said earlier, please describe how the program or project will provide services or activities that directly enable work, education, and health monitoring for at least 5 years. So again, from the completion of your project. So this will be something that we'll be looking for in our program requirements. So next steps, I want to just kind of highlight and summarize kind of the presentation for you this morning. But again, so July 15th through July 18th is a letter of intent window. And then, like I said, the official grant program will launch early 2023. So we'll be opening up for applications. Again, your LOI isn't a requirement for applications in the earlier in 2023. It just really helps us get organized around, what we want, what we might want to fund as a state of Colorado for capital projects. CBO wants broadband projects that are community-driven partnerships that address parts of Colorado that currently have no access or poor access to the internet, and middle-mile infrastructure. And the Colorado Broadband Office is here to help you. So there's a couple of ways. We're going to be doing a lot of community engagement. We have meetings and webinars. We'll be doing a lot of that outreach over the next several months. And then obviously you can always subscribe to our CBO newsletter. The email is there. And then if you have any questions specifically about our broadband, Advanced Colorado Broadband website, we provided the link there for you as well. all of our grant information on the federal funding programs will be on that page. So we wanted to make it a little easy, set aside a page for these programs so that you have the latest and greatest and it's not hard to find. And then lastly, I know, we did a webinar on Friday and we had some questions. And I thought that it would probably be helpful between now and the 18th to do a Q&A with the stakeholders so that you can ask us any questions that you have about the LOI to make sure that you're set up for success. So we'll be looking at that. And then the other thing too is, for the ISPs on the call, we definitely want a partnership. I know the capital projects have limited criteria for entities that can accept funding. But we're looking for a partnership. So if you're out there and you have a really great project in the area, I encourage you to go and have conversations with the eligible entities that are that can accept, that we can grant money to, because obviously for the most part, the communities and partners and stakeholders really want to partner. They're not interested in being ISPs necessarily. And if you are interested in being an ISP as well, you can do that as a local government. But we see this as a partnership, and I know that the match is something that's came up as well. And it's typical for grant programs to have a match. The state of Colorado has matches on most of their grants, and so we see this as just a best practice. And again, like I said, if you cannot afford the match, we can grant some leniency there, but we want to see what communities come up with. So again, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I really look forward to seeing all the great ideas out there in our community. It's going to, like I always say, it's a great time to be in broadband. We have a lot of money, and we definitely want to move the needle in this space. And then I'll put one more plug out there. We launched our digital government strategic plan last week, and we are collecting data from folks in the field related to broadband. So I encourage you to fill out the survey. We're trying to get as many folks, we're trying to collect as much input as possible in that survey and that strategy so that we understand the needs of Coloradans and the digital divide so that we can set up a long-term funding strategy for the state. So I highly encourage you to fill out the survey, let us know, and have your voices be heard. So with that being said, I will open it up for questions. Lauren, do you want to lead?
Sure. Thanks, Brandy. So we've got a few questions that have come in over chat. So I'm going to start with those. If you would like to pop on screen and ask your question, just use the raise your hand feature, which is under icons, reactions. There's a little raise your hand feature. So if you'd like to pop on and ask too, you're welcome to do it that way. But I'm going to start with one on the chat. So this question is regarding the multi-purpose facilities. Did you say the funds can be used to construct the facility itself or only the IT associated with it?
It's the IT associated with it. But
okay.
Let me double check. I can double check on that, but I believe it's the IT associated with it.
Okay. So we can send that out. We will send out follow-up after the webinars with some more information. We've had a lot of similar questions asked, so we'll make sure that we're addressing those. So you will see follow-up in case your question is not answered here. Okay, so Brandy, next question. Is there a preference for more regional letters of intent, including multiple projects, or should each project be submitted separately?
It really depends on how you're setting up your partnership. I think if it's, I think regional broadband projects, if you have a bunch of partnerships in one region, submitting one LOI on behalf of the region that captures all the partners and components of your project is good. But there's also instances where it's not a regional situation. It's very localized. So to answer your question, it really depends on what your project is. And so I know it's kind of the non-answer, but it really depends. And And if you have any other questions, you can obviously reach out, but we definitely want to see as many applications as possible. So if you're unsure, just go ahead and submit, and we'll figure it out on the back end.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do one more from chat, and then I'm going to go to a question that we have on the screen. So this question says, if we choose an area for CPF and do an LOI for you based on that area, can we amend that area later when funding gets closer? Or do we have to choose and commit to an exact area for CPF right now?
You know, I think you can make changes to it later. Again, like I said, you know, these are kind of projections, and, you know, it's going to take a little bit more data collection probably from communities to really define the boundaries. But, you know, just the thing about capital projects is, you know, the communities have to define an area of critical need. So you'll want to try to be as clear in your area as you can. But, you know, if it changes a little bit as you move along in your project planning, that's fine as well. But we're trying to get some early projections of where you guys feel like you're underserved or not served. So yes, we can revise it a little later, but we want to get as close to the picture as possible for our plans for Treasury.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. I'm actually going to address a couple here. We will post this slide deck to our website after this, so we'll make sure everybody has access to it. And then there was one other question that said, if a community misses the July 18th due date, what do they do beyond that point? We understand there's a lot to do to submit a proposal. Again, they're not required, a letter of intent is not required for funding, and it does not guarantee it as well, but we will do more community outreach, like Brandy said, and make ourselves available to help you prepare for that actual grant application. So it is not required. But we're here to help too. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm going to, so I saw, Wendell, you had your hand up. I don't see you anymore. Did you still want to ask your question?
You answered it with availability of the slides. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, great. All right, another hand is raised. Craig, do you want to pop on and ask your question?
Yep. Hey, Brandy, on your ACP slide, I think you said that ACP required providers to offer one low-cost option. But my understanding was that while a whole bunch of biggest operators said that they would do that under ACP, that the actual requirement was under CPF, the Treasury rule, which doesn't change anything because at a state level, you can still require both things be done. But I just wanted to check on who was actually requiring that.
It's CPF that's requiring it. So if you're already doing that as a provider, you're probably checking that box for CPF. But it is a requirement for capital. Mm-hmm.
And then also, when you think about the Data Act maps that will be available later in the location fabric, you know, it seems like we're building to the locations of today, but we're going to be building over the next 4 or 5 years. And Colorado housing starts and people moving to unincorporated Weld County, it seems like we'll have more locations each and every year. How do you think about building to where people will live versus building to where the need was during the pandemic?
Well, that's more of a that's more of like a non-capital projects fund answer, right? It's you know, we have today's money and we have today's underserved and not served. And that's what we're prioritizing. So we're not, you know, in terms of future builds, you know, it's a little, you know, it's kind of crystal ball, if you will, and the funds are available now. And they all have time frames, you know, for spending. So, you know, I think what could happen or might happen too, because some of these programs, so for example, like BEAD, you know, and even capital projects fund, you know, it's like a five-year funding period. So if something changes between now and later, you know, it'd be interesting to kind of capture that in our data. And again, like that's probably more appropriate for our digital statewide broadband plan, because it'll really lay out some of those the existing priorities and future priorities for the state of Colorado, so that we can, when funding is available, we can go into those areas that we think might not be served very well. But it's kind of hard to know not going to be served until it's built. You know, it's more crystal ball on that part. So.
Got it. Thank you. And then lastly, is this LOI information to be collected next month, does that feed into what you call the 5-year plan under IIJA? And if so, does that information go by the IIJA definition of unserved and what reliable broadband is versus CPF?
No, this is specifically for the Treasury and the IIJA money. That's being administered through the NTIA, and I know it's kind of alphabet soup here, but the capital. What I anticipate is that we'll probably get more submittals than we'll be able to fund. So I would see that this work will be leveraged when we develop our 5-year action plan for BEAD under IIJA. So that, because we have our statewide strategy, we'll have our CPF strategy, our middle mile strategy, and then obviously our digital equity strategy. So we want to leverage all of that work that we're doing for our 5-year plan.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. Brandy, this question is around if a municipality hasn't completed any surveys or put together any broadband data, they're worried about being able to do that in a 4-week time frame for the LOI. Do you have any guidance on that for them? Something quick they can put together?
What I would say is submit what you have, because I realize there's a lot of communities that do not have the capacity. Having worked in a small town, you're just trying to keep the bills on, keep the lights and the bills paid, right? Keep the lights on. And so what we've done is we're in the process of hiring staff to support communities in their development of their plans, so that we can walk hand in hand together through this process. But what I would say to you is submit what you have so that we can get a sense of what you're thinking. And I know there might be some gaps, but even on the data side, you can, and this is just really, really small potatoes, but let's say at your town board meeting or your town council meeting, you could do a public hearing on broadband and collect public comments. So it could be as simple as a public hearing. So for this process, if you will, with the idea that, as your plans develop, you can sharpen your pencil and do some more polling and stuff like that. But I just want you to know that we are talking at the state about how we provide additional bandwidth to communities that just they're not scaled to really, do a huge project, because I realize their funds are tight. So we're thinking about that. I don't have any answers on that. But as far as outreach and stuff, it could be as simple as having a public hearing and collecting public comment.
Great, thanks, Brandy. The next question is there a pro forma that we can use to put in our LOIs?
So the pro forma, we're not requesting a pro forma necessarily. The budget data that is in the LOI is what we're requesting at this point, and the pro forma will be relevant when we actually open up the grant application. I wanted to keep the barriers of getting your project out pretty minimal, because I do know when you're getting into the pro forma space, you're probably expending a lot of resources. So for the LOI, we're just the only financial questions that we're asking are in the LOI. So nothing is an additional to that. And when we roll out the official application, we'll be asking some of those questions.
All right, thank you. Next question, are public-private relationships required for funding? Will preference be given to those with established public-private relationships over purely private industry projects?
So, the capital projects fund is there's a huge community partnership piece to that. But if you're an ISP and you want to apply, or you want to fill out an LOI, you certainly can. It'd be nice if we saw, what type of community-driven solutions you have. But certainly, you can fill out the LOI, but it'd be nice to have some sort of sense of what type of community solution you're providing.
Okay, thank you. Next question, will this include state facilities and buildings?
Yeah, so this is where the middle mile piece is important. So if you're leveraging state assets in your proposal, we want to know that so that that we can, you know, see if it makes more sense in CPF or if it makes sense on the middle mile side. But the CPF funding could include state assets like, you know, like for example, like a CDOT build of fiber down one of the highways, or you know, extending fiber out to a state park, middle mile fiber out to a state park, and opening up access along the way. So yes, to answer your question, it could include some of that.
Okay, so the next question, this one is around being short-staffed and being able to, I think, fill out the information. With many communities being short-staffed, how can they hire a qualified consultant to help them get their info into the state? I don't know, Brandy, if you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so the LOI, you know, I know it might require some resource. I'm hoping it doesn't, but if you can't get your resources together to fill out the LOI, you can always not do the LOI because it's kind of a short time frame. It's about 4 weeks. You know, you can always get your resources prepared so that you can make an official application. But for those communities that, you know, don't have the resources right now, I think what I'd like to have you do is just try to fill out the LOI so I can get your ideas. If you have a proposal or some high level proposal, like it, you know, I want to make sure that the communities because in the communities that don't have the staff, those are the communities that are the most in need in some aspects. So just fill out the LOI if you even have a desire to be part of the federal funding, because then we can help you vet the project over the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question. This is, I think, a little bit similar to what we've asked or what we've answered before, but I just want to make sure if the information is being addressed. It says, if we are working with 3 ISPs on 3 different proposals for different areas of the county, can that all be in one LOI or should it be separate?
It can be in one LOI. So depending on how your partnerships are structured, you might be in a consortium, or you might be a county that's doing work on behalf of different communities or stakeholder groups. So if it makes sense for you to just do one LOI, that would be great. It would be easier for us at the state to kind of assess what's going on with your project. So certainly do that. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, next question. Will the ACP requirement for digital connectivity work with providing computer labs or connection spaces?
I'll have to answer that question, I guess, a little later, because I'd have to go and look at all the requirements for the ACP. But if you have any questions about what the ACP requires, there's a website, and you can go on the website and look at that. The state is really, we're implementing the Capital Projects Fund, the Digital Equity Planning, the Digital Equity Act money, the Middle Mile Program, and BEAT. So we're not directly implementing the ACP. So if you have any specific questions related to ACP, I encourage you to just go to their website.
And we'll make sure we provide that in our follow-up. Okay, the next question is there any assistance available to municipalities or regions that unserved or underserved to assist with conducting surveys and data collection to apply for CPF or BEAD funding?
Yeah, so and I'll just speak to the BEAD program. So the state will receive about $5 million for that type of work, and we can certainly work with communities to survey and do some polling for what community members and stakeholders and ISPs would like to see as far as how the program's implemented. The Capital Projects Fund, again, I said I'm onboarding some staff right now that'll help you with capacity around those types of questions, like how do you survey your community? What tools are there out there? There's some free tools, and I know the state offers some of them. So, but yeah, I mean, I think we can assist you with it. We can't do the work for you, but we can assist you with it. And I know I'm working internally to figure out how to bring some resources to communities. But again, I know polling and surveying it takes work. And if you already have 10 jobs or 10 hats that you're wearing, it's a little difficult. The other thing too is there's other partnerships too in your community potentially that can help. So, I would look to a chamber of commerce if you have the chamber, or I know the Colorado State University, they have some resources for communities to help get the word out and do polling. So there might be some workforce centers in your area. So if you don't have the resources, I would encourage you to maybe reach out to one of your partners to help. I know I've done that in the past where I've leveraged school districts to help get access tools and do some of that capacity building issues to address some of the capacity building issues that you have in those smaller communities. But what I'd like to do is, if you really have issues around that, let's set up a time to talk about how we get you across the finish line. Because I'm really motivated to make sure these dollars get into areas of critical need. So if that's an issue, we can work through some of that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brandy. Okay, so the next question. So this is currently extending onto Craig's earlier question, but this person says the commercial industry, wired and wireless, is investing significantly in plant, especially to support the rollout of 5G, including backbone. The significant high speed and fixed wireless connections to consumers are still to come. How to factor that expansion in? Are you talking to industry?
Yeah, we talk to industry all the time. So, we did a whole Capital Projects Fund outreach tour about a month ago. We received a lot of really good input from industry, and we incorporate those in our plans as those projects are eligible. But for us, we're kind of hamstringed by the federal requirements. So if we can't fund a fixed wireless project, it's not because we don't want to, it's because our funding requirements tell us otherwise. And what I like about the federal funds is, we have the kind of the strict funds where it's like capital projects, this is what it is, it's fiber, and here's your eligible entities. But then you have BEAD that's coming that opens up a lot of funding, even more for some of those other technologies that could absolutely be a solution for folks across Colorado. So we're implementing the programs as they're defined, and so if we can fund some of that other types of technologies, we'll definitely try to do that. But it really is dictated by our federal funding requirements.
Okay, thank you. Next question, is there a limit to how large a CPF grant can be? 2 million, 3 million?
No, there's no limit. Yeah, there's no limit to how big a CPF project can be.
Okay, great, thank you. This next question, actually, Megan, you might need to jump on. This is around mapping and the information that the state is able to provide. And this question is, Howard Feingold, if you want to pop on and elaborate a little bit more, but basically the question is around the state providing data to support the need, basically. So I don't know, Megan, if you want to elaborate a little bit on what kind of maps the state might be working on right now to support these proposals, or what we currently have as well.
Yeah, it looks like Howard went off mute. So if you have anything to elaborate on, go for it before I jump in.
Megan, this is Mike Brennan. I'm actually going out on Howard's name. We were going back and forth. We're trying to multitask and we're failing. So anyways, go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
Yeah, so we have the state broadband maps that we create in the CBO. Our aim is that they are more accurate than what you're seeing from the FCC. And they are published a little bit quicker than what you see from the FCC. We're constantly working on improving the accuracy of those maps. And we do realize that there still are inaccuracies, and we know those exist. We're also, we have speed test data that we're working to incorporate into the mapping and make available for some of this grant planning. I know there's another question a little lower about mapping state infrastructure assets. We don't have a comprehensive database of infrastructure like fiber, conduit, towers. But we are working on, you know, collecting that data from various sources and figuring out how we can put that together in a way that's useful for all this planning for funding. So I guess long story short, we're working on a lot of stuff right now, including a new mapping platform that will be, you know, a lot easier to use for you folks. So if you do have questions or requests, you can reach out to me or, you know, the CBO email, and we'll make sure that those get in the queue for, you know, our future improvements.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I'm not trying to throw stones, Megan. It's really hard. So, you know, getting that proper information into this reports, I think will get us a lot more money. It's just, that's an investment in time. Just want to bring that up.
Yeah, and I'll also say, as much data or evidence that you have, put it in your, you know, maybe it doesn't all need to be in the letter of intent, but when it comes around to the application, the more information, the better. We know the flaws in the federal data and the state data, and you know your community. So if you have evidence showing that your area is not served or doesn't have what it needs, include that, because it might contradict what our maps say, and we can work on figuring out how, you know, how to integrate that information into the funding program.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. Appreciate the help.
Mm-hmm.
While we're on the topic of maps, and I will give everyone a heads up, we are at time, but I think we can maybe answer just a couple more questions. Someone had asked about the fixed NTIA maps that are coming and their potential impacts on our plans as well. Megan or Brandy, do you want to elaborate on NTIA's maps that are about to be released?
Yeah, so from my understanding, they're going to be draft maps, not final maps, and they're going to be issued or published at the end of this year, early next year, but probably at the end of this year. And then the states will have an opportunity to work with the FCC on finalizing the maps. So basically making sure that they're accurate, because it is a basis for BEAD funding. And so we are in the process at the CBO of hiring somebody to develop our maps. Actually, not develop, we'll develop our maps, but also get service level data fabrication. Am I saying it right, Megan? Our locations was it? I'll let Megan explain that.
Serviceable location fabric.
Great, thank you, Megan. Yeah, so we are in the process of getting that, so we can actually tell exactly what type of service folks are getting at their location. So we're going to be working over the next 6 months to do that, so that we are prepared for when the FCC comes out and publishes those maps, so that we can make sure that they're accurate. Did I miss anything, Megan?
I don't think so.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, great. We know that there's some questions that we're not getting to here on the chat, so we will address them in our follow-up. But Craig, you did raise your hand. Do you have one quick question to ask?
I don't know if it's quick, but thanks, Brandy, for putting up with us. So ARPA statute and CPF, have the priority for fiber. I think that's translated here. But then we see the wireless icon in the logo of Advanced Colorado Broadband, and so it would suggest that like the statute says, that the technologies are fine. But if you talk about how you think about prioritizing fiber, whether it's a score, and then how we think about the hybrid wireless deployments, because wireless is super capable these days, as we've seen in the last weeks, where there's gigabit wireless over 6 gigahertz spectrum, and it's just a lower cost option. And the places we have to reach in Colorado, there's some of the highest hanging fruit, I guess, where they're the highest cost, and there's a reason why they're unserved. So can you talk about how you would actually prioritize and allow for other technologies in either a scoring or a review?
Yeah, so we haven't developed the scoring criteria yet because we just launched this last week. But I guess to answer your question, we're going to prioritize what the regulations tell us we can prioritize. And that's kind of the short answer for you. And I totally agree. I think, it's there's not a business case, or even it's not even practical to do fiber in a lot of the areas in Colorado. So I agree, and I agree that fixed wireless it's definitely an alternative for certain areas in Colorado. But we have to prioritize what the federal government tells us we can prioritize in our funding. And so we don't have a lot of room for deviation there. But I totally agree. I think it makes sense for fixed wireless in certain parts of Colorado for sure. But we have some flexibility, but then we don't have flexibility. But the good news is there's a huge opportunity in the BEAD program. Capital projects, not so much. But I know there's a preference for fiber in these federal programs. So we're going to try to build as much of that as we can.
Yep, understand. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. We are over time, so we're going to have to stop. Like I said, we will take whatever questions we were not able to get to, and we will follow up. And we'll also send out this presentation, the webinar recording, and a bunch of other information for you to help you out. So, and as always, we're always here to help. So please reach out. But Brandy, do you have anything else that you want to close with?
No, I just want to say thank you guys for jumping on this webinar. This isn't the last time you'll hear from us on this subject, but it's a good start, and we're looking forward to your proposals. And again, just submit what you can, and we'll look at what you're thinking, and we'll try to see what we can do. But this is a great start, and I look forward to working with all of you on all your broadband projects and really helping us close this divide. So with that being said, you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll look out for more information from us. But again, if you have any questions, we're available, so don't hesitate to reach out. Again, thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.